by a county judge here as it was eligible for public release, even though the police were not thrilled about that. So there were in that file, and I got a copy of it very soon after it was initially released, and that was a big news story for 2 weeks down here. There were 2 witnesses in there who said that they had seen Jeffrey Dahmer at the shopping mall. One of them said he saw a man he thought was Dahmer throw a child he thought was Adam into a blue van, in the fire lane outside Sears, and then screech away. And this man was just shocked by, how do you treat a child like that? It was just regular shopping day, Monday afternoon at Sears. Second witness was a man who Dahmer, he said Dahmer approached him, not at Sears, but at a store not terribly far from there. And Dahmer, comes at him drunk and disheveled and, starts, chatting with him. Hi there, nice day, isn't it? And Dahmer, with his ice-cold eyes, this was a scary thing for this man who has a artificial leg, so it wasn't like he could sprint away. And trying to ignore someone from arm's length distance talking to you is also not an easy thing to do. And finally, after whatever number of seconds, let's say it was 30, the man who he said was Dahmer turned away. And then this witness said he followed the man, Dahmer, at a safe distance and saw him walk into the Sears store. And then at that point he thought, I think I need to get out of here because this guy, doubles back and I'm in trouble. So those were 2 very compelling witnesses who said they saw Dahmer at the mall that day, right around the time that Adam disappears. Police were not that thrilled to speak to them. It did take statements from the second guy. That took them 3 months to actually sit down, and they did a statement. And then they did their investigation and said, no, we don't believe him. That just doesn't make any sense to us. And this is one of they had come forward just after Dahmer was arrested in Milwaukee. One of them was a printer at the Miami Herald, and he saw the early edition of the Herald off the press. And the first day story about Dahmer in the Miami Herald had a thumbnail of Dahmer, was inside the paper, and this man freaks out and says, "That's the guy." Remember, 10 years earlier, told all his friends who were still there. That I told you, I saw somebody. Somebody approached me at the shopping mall that day, and this is the guy, and it was Jeffrey Dahmer. So again, the police not interested. In 2008, when the rest of the file is open because the Hollywood police chief closed the case, and now the remaining 12 years of stuff is in there, then I get a copy immediately and start looking through, and I find 5 more witnesses in the police files who when I spoke to them, all identified the person that they had seen at the mall at that time as Jeffrey Dahmer. So that made 7. That was pretty compelling too. The police, who now are on the record saying that it's Zada's tool, are really not interested in Jeffrey Dahmer at that point. That was they had closed the case a year. The new police chief came in 3 months after I had a story on ABC Primetime, and that was embarrassing to the police. National television. I'd broken the story in print in 2006. In beginning of 2007, I was all over, all the great talk shows, the Anderson Coopers and the Nancy Graces and all that stuff. So that was So the story is there. You can see most of that on the internet, and they. So all these witnesses are saying, agreeing with the first two, and that's very compelling. There were 2 weak witnesses for Otto's tool. Now maybe I've got 7 weak witnesses for Jeffrey Dahmer, but there's 7. I'm winning 7-2 here, and even if I'm wrong, then it was worth investigating, and police didn't do it. The blue van was another hit. The police were initially had a witness who told them they saw a man take Adam from a blue and scoot away in a blue van. Where Jeff worked in what's now the town of Sunny Isles in the north part of Dade County on the beach. It was a sub shop, and I found it was no longer around by 1991, much less in 2002 when I first was looking for it. And they, I did find one person who knew about it and had been a part owner of it, and then that woman, I was very lucky, got me, and then I eventually found 4 people who remembered Jeff Dahmer working at that store, 8 people who remembered that there was a blue van for delivering pizza. It was a Southern pizza shop. So blue van, 7 witnesses who saw Dahmer. There's a found head and Jeff had 11 severed heads in his apartment in Milwaukee. Now, is that like nothing? Is that like getting maybe if it's not definitive, but maybe it's worth some investigation? Does that sound good to you?
And before we get into how inept the people involved in this whole thing are, I did want to ask you about that, because you talked about the severed heads and of course the severed head that was found. Before we get into all these different parties that were quite frankly inept, can you talk a little bit about this situation as it relates to Dahmer's MO? You've touched on one thing there. Can you elaborate a little bit more for people that maybe are novices about Dahmer and the parallels here?
Jeff, I learned through Jeff's roommate in the Army in Germany, where Jeff had been stationed through March of '81 until they finally threw him out of the Army, threw his butt out of there. It's not a happy story from the roommate. It was a story of torture and being locked in the room and drugged and raped and beaten and stabbed and operated on, because they were both in a medical unit, and no one listening to the man who was the victim. So among other things, in Germany, while Jeff was stationed there, it was reported that there were a series of unsolved mutilation murders that, when I mapped them, were about 50-mile radius from the base. The prosecutors in Germany said there were 9. There were the press said 4, and then I did some further research in German newspapers with assistance and found about a dozen in there. So Jeff would come back. He would disappear on weekends and come back on at least 5 occasions with blood on his clothes and clothes torn and ripped, and otherwise, and the skin mangled and stuff. And one occasion, there was so much blood on his torso that when Jeff took off his shirt, that the blood stuck to his chest and ripped off a lot of skin. There were 6-inch hunting knives that Jeff kept in his locker, and the roommate would find blood and mucus on them. The roommate didn't know what was going on at the time, except it didn't look good. It was no, the roommate was trying to survive. He did survive, and so there are possible murders of, by the way, not just younger boys, but women too in Germany. As for children, Jeff has an arrest in 1982 in Milwaukee County for masturbating in front of 12 and 13-year-olds, two kids. In Germany, on two occasions, the military police brought Jeff back to their room and found him with his pants down. One time, his pants were down the whole time even when they brought him back to the room, and he had been masturbating in front of children of younger age, whatever it was. So yeah, so there was some memo in there that suggested children, and not just the MO of when people say that Jeff's MO didn't include 6-year-old boys. If they were 12, maybe. But Jeff's MO is what Jeff said his MO is. And then everybody decides that, that must be what it is. So there's actually more than that. So there are similarities there, and certainly the collection of heads and other body parts in his apartment is highly suggestive. That continues not to be a regular thing to find severed heads, much less collect them. Now, of course, Jeff in 1981 isn't set up in an apartment, in a permanent apartment, the way he was in 91. So he may, whatever with the heads, there's, it was 10 years before. You can't, maybe he kept it for a while and then needed to dispose of it. And he's got access to a blue delivery van, which everyone, the 8 people I spoke to said, that van would disappear, overnight. There was you didn't have to sign it out. You just took it. The keys were over here on a nail. You just grabbed it. Nobody really cared about, as long as the van eventually came back, that was fine. That van was available. That was Jeff's vehicle, and anybody else's vehicle. That gives and by the canal off the turnpike where the head was found, there were 2 drivers for Publix supermarkets who told police that they had seen a blue van off by the side of the road and somebody down, closer to the water. This was like midnight on 2 days basically before the head was found. So all of these, there's a lot of evidence. I've documented everything I have in the books, and it's good. It's really good. It's worthy. It's certainly worthy of further investigation and official investigation, shall we say? And but the police were literally not interested. They were never interested. I showed it to them at various times. I gave them a list of the people who knew Dahmer and knew of the blue van, and gave them all the phone numbers, and they called 2 people, the 2 people who knew Dahmer but didn't actually remember the blue van or no. And those are the 2 people they called, and they said, it's unfounded, and we're closing this out.
It's great you made the connections, and then you quickly transitioned to the fact that they're just, okay, look, I know police departments get a lot of quacks coming in with crazy leads and things like that. You're showing them, right, and you're showing them all these things, and they're just ignoring it. So I guess now's a great time for you to talk about just how blind the police were to the investigation, and of course the medical examiner too, because that was one of the most interesting things to me.
the blindness, it's sort of a willful blindness. It